faction-specific cards are really important in making the identity and of the warband in question. So let's have a look at the faction cards in the new Ravagers set. Are they going to make them nice and fluffy, or are they going to be a bit meh? Let's take a peek. Let's look at the nitty-gritty now of this warband as we look at their faction-specific cards. Starting off with the objectives. First one up, Raised Realm. So score this in an end phase if there are 2 or more desecration tokens on the battlefield. I mean, that's an auto-include, I guess. Particularly when you're kind of first starting out with the warband and trying to getting a feel for them, it's just going to be lobbed in there straight away. Ravagers all, score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is inspired. I think that's one that I think people are going to want to play around with to start off with. I think 1 glory might be undercosting that, possibly. I think, I don't know. I'm intrigued by that one. That's one that I think you'd have to play with the warband a little bit to see if that is how easy that is to do. Power of Chaos, the first surge card. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter spell that deals damage that takes an enemy fighter out of action. Probably worth taking because inspired 2 damage is quite a big deal from her spell attack action, and there might be some nice spells to kind of help out with that as well. On the Dark Road, again for 1 glory, hybrid card. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more surviving friendly fighters each have 3 or more upgrades, or each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more upgrades. I mean, we're seeing this particular card a lot in the game. It's a kind of faction specific card that is being used quite a bit. That wording anyway, particularly in this Voltron meta at the minute as well. It's probably a shoe-in to take that card, I think. Next up, Malevolent Exploits. Make sure I get that right. Another surge. Score this immediately after playing your 3rd or subsequent power card in a single power step. Again, we're seeing this card a lot. It's Ploymaster. It's come back at the end, but it's just faction specific. Then Hurricane of Violence. Cracking name for a card, that one. Score this in an end phase if friendly fighters' attack action took 2 or more enemy fighters in enemy territory out of action in the preceding action phase. Is it worth 2 for other warbands that have that? I can't remember, but that seems quite a good card to have. You're going to be playing quite aggro with them. So that seems like a shoe-in. Glorious Slaughter. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more enemy fighters are out of action. Or if you know who you're playing against, that's a great card. And if you can like deck build, because you know you're playing your mate who's bringing Skaven, or well, maybe Skaven's a terrible example because you can bring people back. But if you're playing Gits, if you know you're playing Gits, you're going to put that card in. But for a tournament, I mean, you're screwed if you come up against elites all tournament, and at the minute it's probably not great for tournaments. But if you know who you're playing against and you can just play in your mates, and they like hordes, it's a great card. Next up, Fierce Conquerors. A dual card. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more friendly fighters are in enemy territory and there are 2 or more desecration tokens on the battlefield. Ooh. I think 2 glory is a fair reward for that card. It sounds very tricky to pull off, but it's all down to where you put your objectives during objective placement. A nice dual card there. I can see a lot of players potentially taking that once they've got hang of playing this warband. Next up, Desolate Domain. A Surge card, score this immediately after an activation if each objective token in one or more players' territories has a Desecration token. That ties in quite nicely with the previous card. If you have set up your board in the right way and you've only got one Desecration, you've only got one objective token in your half, then you're going to score that quite easily, and that's an easy glory to score. I can see a lot of people taking that. Dark Approval, another Surge, a 2 Glory Surge. Score this immediately after an activation in which your leader makes an attack action that takes an enemy leader out of action. Victorious Duel. I mean, again, if you know who you're going up against, it's probably worth taking, but is it worth taking in a tournament? At the minute, I would probably say no. But you never know how the meta is going to swing with the Voltron thing kind of happening at the minute, and Mollog being so prevalent. Is that the right word? Mollog being bloody everywhere, and obviously you've got Man Trappers as well. You could spend a day where you end up playing more games against those particular guys as opposed to playing guys with an easier to kill boss. But again, a fairly standard card that we see in the game though. Brutal Desecration. Another Surge, score this immediately after your warband desecrates an objective. Why wouldn't you put that in your deck if you're playing these? If you don't put this in your deck when you're playing these, you're a moron and you should go and play a different game. And then finally, Absolute Desecration. 4 Glory. Score this in the third end phase if there are 4 or more Desecration tokens on the battlefield. 4. I think that the reward for that is spot on, but that's going to be very tough to score. And if you have that in your opening hand, you're bricking it. So, but it's a very good fluffy card, but I don't really see that getting much play, if I'm being honest. So that was the objectives. We'll now move on to the faction-specific upgrades. Unearthly Charisma, +1 dice to other friendly fighters, range 1 attacks if they are within 2 hexes of this fighter, and that's a leader card. It's quite interesting that they've called it a leader card as opposed to putting the leader's name on it. If you're not aware, you will find out why that is in a sec. But that's a really good card. That's great. I can see that going in. Ruinous Might, +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions. Again, a nice, fairly standard card. A faction-specific weapon, Hellfire Sword. A range 3, 2 hammer, 2 dice attack for Khagra and Razek. That's fantastic. That's a nice little kind of tool to have in the toolkit. Grudging Defense. This fighter is on guard. We're kind of seeing these type of cards quite a lot now. I mean, stick that. If you have Razek inspired and on guard and just sitting on an objective, happy days. Gifted Sorcerer. You can re-roll 1 dice in this fighter's casting rolls and spell attack action rolls. If you're going to kind of lean towards magic, that's a great card to have. Desecrator Gauntlets. So a reaction after this fighter's move action, push 1 adjacent enemy fighter 1 hex. So we're kind of seeing this type of stuff a bit more as well, particularly with the Arena Mortis Gauntlets. Conqueror's Cloak, +2 move if this fighter is making a charge. They need that kind of extra boost to their movement. So that's a nice card to have. Bolstered by Hate, +1 wounds. Again, a fairly standard card that we see in these packs. Blazing Rune Shield. This is for everyone except for the wizard. Spells cannot deal damage to this fighter. That's an interesting card. That is an interesting card. Very much a toolkit card. So if you want to kind of be prepared for anything, having that in your deck might be quite a nice card to have. Blasphemous Cuirass. When this fighter is the target of an attack action, if there are one or more shields in this fighter's defense roll, reduce the damage dealt by that attack action by 1. Again, we're seeing lots of this kind of damage and reduction cards. So that's nothing brand new. One of those cards that will be painfully consistent for your opponents and very inconsistent for you, is how these type of cards tend to pan out for me. We now kind of move into the gambits. So rack the land. Pick one objective token in an empty hex with one hex within one hex of one or more friendly fighters. Desecrate that objective. Fairly standard auto card there. I mean, that's a great card that kind of gets that desecration trainer rolling and can help your dudes get inspired. Whispers of Chaos, the first spell in here. If cast, choose one enemy fighter within 3 hexes of the caster, push that fighter up to 1 hex, then pick one. Deal damage or give that fighter a remove token. So, as I kind of mentioned in the previous video, I think these guys, as well as kind of aggro, are going to be quite control as well. Stopping people moving, definitely helpful with keeping things desecrated. So if you can get a kill with it, brilliant. But if not, you're just going to stop that character from making a move action. I think that's a great spell, if I'm being honest. Spurred on, another one restricted just to the leader. Reaction, play this after a friendly leader's move action. Choose another friendly fighter. That fighter makes 1 move action. So again, being able to desecrate tokens quite quickly if you're able to move one of the support fighters. Ritual Desecration. Pick one objective token in the same hex as a friendly fighter. Desecrate that objective. That fighter is inspired. Wow, that's interesting. That's a great card. Again, going straight in that one. Ravaging Advance. Push each friendly fighter that is not in enemy territory up to 1 hex towards enemy territory. Oh, my aggro senses are tingling. I'm really liking reading these cards. I think that's quite a strong card. Power Reclaimed. Play this if your leader is out of action. The friendly Zashia is a leader, has +1 wounds and +1 wizard level. This effect persists until that fighter is taken out of action. There is a lot to break down on this card. So I mentioned about the leader signal being on cards. This is why you can make Zashia a leader. You give her an extra wounds and you bump them up a wizard level. So you've got a level 3 wizard chucking some dice. You can potentially build a deck based around making this wizard the Don, because if you charge in with the boss and just go around and start killing stuff, and you have to deal with that. But then once you've dealt with that, you can potentially then make this boss the Don. I think this is a great way of adding more kind of deck building elements to this warband, because you can think about this as your backup plan. And then the fact this effect persists until that fighter is taken out of action, it makes sense. I mentioned in a previous video that I think persisting effects is going to be quite a big deal in this expansion, and there is a weapon that the Seraphon have where you can stop persisting effects. I think we're going to see a lot more strong persisting effects like this because of that. We've got another spell, Mask of Darkness. Gambit spell with a focus. If cast, choose one friendly fighter within 3 hexes of the caster. Place that fighter in the same hex as an objective in enemy territory. Then give that fighter 1 move token. Again, another great way of getting people forward and possibly desecrating an objective. Quite a strong spell there, in my opinion. Flames of Spite. A reaction, play this during a friendly fighter's attack action after the determined success step if the attack action resulted in a critical hit plus 1 damage to that attack action until it has been resolved. Great. Again, it's not something brand new, but it is quite a strong card if you're going to be playing aggressively. And then Eye of the Gods. I like this card a lot. Play this only if 1 or more enemy leaders are out of action. Pick one. Dice, damage, cleave or ensnare. Your leader's range 1 and range 2 attack actions gain that rule. This effect persists until that fighter is taken out of action. Very strong card. Again, there are warbands that this is probably going to be useless against, but I think that's a nice kind of touch. And then finally, Eternal Vendetta. You can reroll 1 attack dice in the attack roll of the first attack action made by a friendly fighter in the next activation. Great if you're playing aggro. Or any attack, that you have, really. It's nice to have that kind of safety net there. But I think, and I've mentioned this on one of the Facebook groups, I think straight out of the box, this selection of cards is one of the best for a warband that's been released. I think this is probably the way it's going to go. We saw it with the last 2 warbands where they seemed quite strong out of the box. So the last 2 warbands that got released on their own, so the Morgreif's and Morgoth's warbands. And I think this is how it's now going to be. Particularly now they have introduced Vanguard as a way of playing the game. I know stores aren't open at the minute, but when they do open, there's probably going to be a few warbands out. And if they're hosting a Vanguard tournament, they can say to people, buy a warband on the day, use that warband, build that warband, use it on the day, and you've still, with these cards alone, you would still have a good chance of winning some games. And we've not even looked at the universal cards yet. So I think, I know a lot of people out there don't particularly like power creep, and a lot of people out there would still like to see some support for the older warbands. I'm the kind of other end of that spectrum. I quite like the fact that they're looking at the game and they're tweaking certain mechanics, and naturally new stuff that gets released is going to be better than the old stuff, and I'm kind of all for that. I can understand the frustrations of people. I've got all the old warbands still and I don't really use them for anything other than kind of like Warcry or practicing painting on, but it's kind of how the game progresses. But let me know what you think. What are your thoughts on these cards? What are your favourite ones? Do you think they're as good as I think that they are straight out of the box? Let me know in the comments, and hopefully see you in the next video, which is where we look at the universal cards that everyone gets to enjoy that you can find in this pack.